In 2016, despite how cliche it sounds, I was working as a private investigator in rural Oregon. Most people make the stereotype that private detectives and investigators have walk-in clients, but that simply isn't true. I get almost all of my cases from clients by phone, and the call that I got in June was no exception. The client, a man named Jonathan Alexander, was calling about the disappearance of his father, Sergio Alexander. Jonathan's father had gone missing ever since a solo deer hunting trip in the backwoods of our little Oregon town, and the search parties and official parties hadn't turned up anything. In most cases like this, you're looking for a body in the woods, not a living person. But Jonathan was hopeful, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. In this case, I took my go bag, a duffel bag, and its contents were a bottle of water, a first aid kit, my Taurus Raging Hunter, a bag of Ziploc bags, and my wallet and phone and food. A Taurus Raging Hunter revolver might have been overkill, but I was planning to go into the woods. And the woods can be a dangerous place. This part of Oregon was stocked full of cougars, mountain lions, bears, wolves, moose, and some others, and almost everyone carried a heavier firearm when going into the backwoods. The first place on my schedule was Jonathan's house, where I would meet him in person and have an interview. As I pulled up into his dirt driveway, I got a sense of the person that he was. His house was a 20-foot trailer stuck to the ground, with a backyard and patio facing the mountains. "Are you Jonathan?" I asked the man waiting for me. He was tall, at least 6'5", and wearing a checkered button-up, a trucker cap, and jeans. "Yeah," he replied. "You're Inspector Jacob, right? Come inside, I'll tell you the details. I also have some things that could help you, depending on how willing you are." I walked inside the trailer, and the interior was everything that I expected. The walls were lined with taxidermied bass and catfish, as well as several mounted deer heads and rifles propped up on display. A dirty kitchen with piles of dishes in one corner and a small two-person table in the other. Jonathan, John for short, and I sat down. Jonathan offered me a beer, but I declined. I never drank on the job. I started with the regular questions. Well, where was he last seen? Who was with him? What happened leading up to the night of the disappearance? John replied, telling the whole story. "My dad, Sergio, was a hunter and fisherman. Hunting and fishing were his life. He always had a rifle or a fishing rod. He's in his 60s and was in the military for 7 years. Had a few tours in Afghanistan. On that night, he wanted to go solo buck hunting in the evening, so I dropped him off on a dirt road near his favorite spot. He didn't come back for 2 days. This was somewhat normal. He sometimes would hunt overnight or just got lost. But after a week passed, I got really worried. I could feel that something was wrong. I could feel it to my gut. I called the sheriff and they organized a search party for 3 nights. We went in every direction, covered all the ground, and you know what? Not a single thing. Not a candy bar, no footsteps leading past his spot. No trail, nothing. After he was declared deceased, I went on myself to search. I know that he's still out there. I know it. And where is this dirt road? John marked the road on the GPS on my phone and I thanked him and laughed. I had a no solve, no pay rule, so I wouldn't get paid unless I found Sergio, dead or alive. My next stop was at the sheriff's office in the middle of my small town. I drove past multiple roadside stores until I reached the parking lot of the sheriff's office. I parked and walked into the place, going up to the front desk where a tall and skinny deputy was doing paperwork and chewing gum, presumably as a substitute for a cigarette. I told him that I was looking into the disappearance of Sergio Alexander, and he sent me to the sheriff's office, The sheriff, a balding man in his 50s named Clyde, showed a forced smile as I walked inside. A stained American flag was pinned to the wall, along with dozens of missing person posters and wanted posters. "So, Inspector, is this missing guy a friend of yours?" he asked. "No," I replied. "A client wants me to find him. Sergio is the guy's dad." "Well, you're in luck," Clyde replied. "We haven't gotten much criminal activity, so I can show you some of the search party reports." And Clyde reached into his desk and pulled out a stack of papers and photos which I flicked through. One of the photos captured an image showing a trail of footprints ending abruptly. "And what is this?" I asked. "It's the strangest part of the case. The footprints leading to Sergio's favorite hunting spot just stopped. No trail leading somewhere else, no tire tracks, no ATV tracks, nothing. It's like he just up and vanished into thin air." I sighed. This case was going to be a hard one. What else of interest was there? I asked, looking through the files. Clyde pulled out a satellite image of the woods, with a Sharpie written on the spot where Sergio had gone missing. "This is the entire area in which we estimate that Sergio could have walked around in the time that he was gone," Clyde stated. "And we checked every bit of it. And guess what? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But there was one thing we found of interest." "Which is?" I asked. "Well, there is a pattern. Every time we checked a place, we heard Sergio's radio coming from somewhere." I raised an eyebrow, and Sheriff Clyde continued. "But it was very, very faint. Could barely hear it. And another strange thing was when we went to search for Sergio, in the entire area that he went missing, all the birds and animals were quiet, even the crickets. As soon as we had left the area of the supposed disappearance, the sound all came back." I checked my watch. It was early evening. After jotting down all the notes that I could gather, I thanked the sheriff and I left. My next stop? The woods. By the time I pulled up to the dirt road in my pickup truck, it was well into getting dark. This wasn't the ideal time for me to search through the area and find clues. Every detective knows how important the first 45 hours are. The place was exactly as John had described it. It was extremely rural, just a few miles away from a mountain range, and it was completely silent. The forest should have been alive, with birds chirping, wild turkeys moving about, crickets chirping, but the night was dead. Turning on my headlamp, I found Sergio's footsteps from when he was last seen, and started combing through the area. Just like Clyde and Jonathan had said, the trail abruptly stopped in the middle of the woods. Nothing. No other signs that Sergio was even there. It was as if he had just up and vanished. Suddenly, I heard some rustling behind me. It was fully dark by now and nobody should have been there beside me. The sound came again, except it was now in front of me, but just out of reach of my headlamp. "Who's there?" I yelled. "Show yourself, I'm armed." For dramatization, I flicked the revolver holster from my Taurus on my belt. Suddenly, something tapped me right in the back. I didn't have time to pull out my gun, and considering that whoever was doing this was probably some drunk guy, I wouldn't need it. I turned into a Mike Tyson haymaker in the thing's direction, and ended up hitting a tree and nearly breaking my wrist. In the split second that I was proud of my Mike Tyson haymaker, I realized that I had punched a tree, and that my knuckles were actually bleeding. Whoever was behind me, if there was someone behind me, they were long gone. And that was when the laughing started. Actually, it was more like a cackling. A weird, crazy, and unnatural cackling. Whatever you would call it, it was unsettling anyway. I pulled out my revolver designed to drop bears and fired a deafening shot into the air. The laughing, everything stopped for a bit, and I almost let my guard down. And then I heard something whisper, just an inch away from my ear. It said, "Leave this place." And the next thing I know, I hear the sound of a million running footsteps catching up to me, and I get the heck out of there. I ran right out of the woods, fast enough to outrun Usain Bolt. Adrenaline is one heck of a drug. I jumped in my pickup truck, turned the engine, and peeled out of there all in record time. Whatever was behind me was still chasing me behind the car. I looked into the rearview mirror to try to look at the thing, which was running at least 80 miles per hour to keep up with me, and I saw nothing. Well, it wasn't a conceptual nothing. It was nothing in the sense that it was nothing my brain could comprehend and understand. There was a huge, blurry shape running after me, dark as the night and fuzzy around the edges. It was as if somebody had taken a huge mass of static from an 80s TV, made it into some sort of creature, and put it on a dirt road at 9 o'clock to chase some poor private investigator. I turned the road, drove down the road until I reached town. The thing was obviously gone. I parked at a gas station parking lot and threw up once my body realized how much running I had done. The next day, I headed to a woman named Meredith's house. I had heard about her from when I was at the bar the night I saw the demon thing by some paranormal junkies who were interested in what I said. Meredith owned a teen plant shop at the edge of town, having the shop based on the first floor of her house. She also knew a thing or two about paranormal entities, the occult, monsters, ghouls, and, well, you get the gist. I pulled up into the driveway of her shop and knocked on the door. "We're closed," somebody, probably Meredith, yelled. I looked at the store hours taped on the front door. Today was a Friday, and according to her, probably outdated store hours chart, she was, as a matter of fact, open. "You're open, so stop being lazy," I yelled right back. Meredith ground and opened the triple-lock door. In person, she was a short Latino woman with long black hair and a purple beanie, and wearing a trench coat and jeans, which was not totally suspicious. "What do you want?" she snapped. "What I want is to know what is in those woods. And lady, don't piss me off, I'm still hungover. You studied the paranormal and supernatural, or am I wrong?" "No, you're not wrong." "Good, because yesterday I got bullied and chased by some weird demon thing while looking for a missing man in his 60s. Meredith's face went pale. I taught myself how to learn and read expressions that people make, and by the looks of it, she knew exactly what I was talking about. Come in. I might be able to help you." Like Jonathan's house, I was easily able to tell the interior of the house from the outside. There were plants everywhere, on the walls, growing in giant pots on the floor, as well as shelves stocked full of beakers and test tubes, and a few bags full of strange substances. I sat down on a worn-out couch while Meredith assessed my situation. "First of all, who told you about me?" she asked. "Some British fellow named Ron," I said, but then again I was drunk, so it might have been a John or a Bob. "How did you say this thing looked like?" "Big, dark, and blurry. I couldn't actually see it since I was at least 800 feet away, but it was running 80 miles per hour, whatever it was. Huge, it must have been over 20 feet big." "Did you look at it directly?" Meredith asked. I answered plainly, "No." I looked at it through the rearview mirror though, and even then I couldn't see it very well. "Must be why you're alive." "What was that?" I asked. "What you just described is what we in the business call nagalagkus." "Nagalagkus," I muttered. "The heck is that?" "No one really knows," Meredith replied. "He, she, whatever it is ancient. It's been in these woods for probably over a century, and no one knows where he came from." "You said that you were looking for a missing guy, right?" "Well, the Nagalaku probably took him. It might eat him, might let him go, might keep him for eternity, I don't know." "Then how do I kill this thing?" I asked. "I need to close this case." "Well, you probably can't. Meredith said. But whatever you do, don't look directly at it, or your mind will literally melt at the unfathomable horror, and you will die. Do not look at it. Don't look at the demon thing, I said. Gotcha. Do you have, any herbs or materials that will stop it from hurting me or doing anything? I do, actually. It's white ash, blessed by a shaman. If you sprinkle it over yourself or any weapons you have, it should be more effective against any supernatural being. Meredith stood up and walked toward a cabinet and pulled out a large Ziploc bag of white ash, which seemed to glow and vibrate, and she handed it to me. This ain't free, she said. It's $100. I sighed and reached into my wallet and pulled out $100 in cash and handed it to Meredith in exchange for the white ash. Hey, Meredith called out as I packed up my stuff and headed for the door. Yeah, be careful. Like that was even possible. I got out of there and drove to the gas station, where I planned to get my supplies for the hunt to find Sergio Alexander. But before that, I needed to fuel up. I bought incendiary rounds for my revolver that the gas station surprisingly sold, and I ordered a pineapple pizza while listening to Piano Man by Billy Joel. After I finished up and threw out my garbage, I had devised a plan, which involved flares, a bottle of vodka, a huge jug filled with gasoline, and a Molotov cocktail. The cashier, a guy named John, seemed very interested in the thing that I bought from the gas station. He was a tall guy in his 50s with a graying beard, a trucker cap, and a military attitude. What are all these things for? He asked, as I heaved the heavy gasoline tank onto the counter, along with some other flammable and extremely dangerous things. Oh, nothing, I answered, trying not to sound suspicious. Just trying to take care of a pest problem. But John didn't see that as nothing. You're going into the woods, ain't ya? I was caught off guard by how easily and accurately he knew what I was doing. Yes, I replied. Well, I'm off work after the shift, so I'll come with you. Or I could just report to the police that a private investigator is buying suspicious amounts of flammables and gasoline, along with a .45 Magnum incendiary rounds for a Taurus Raging Hunter revolver. You Army? I asked. Yeah, he replied. Been in the Marines and the Navy for a couple of years. Had 5 tours in Afghanistan. I didn't see any reason why John shouldn't come with me, and besides, I could use his military and combat skills, which might be useful. And I wasn't going to carry a 55-gallon tank full of gasoline in the middle of the woods alone. Fine, I said. Let's do this. A few hours later, just as the sun was setting, John and I got out of my pickup truck in front of the woods. John had brought his trusty 12-gauge packed with Dragon's Breath rounds and a mini flamethrower. John would be my backup and the bait, while I carried the gasoline tank duct-taped to an explosive Molotov cocktail. The plan was, we go to the woods, to the spot where I had last been attacked by the Sagoth, and wait. Once we had heard a sign of him, we would both put on our blindfolds to avoid having our souls sucked out by the unfathomable sight of the eldritch cosmic horror. You ready? John asked. Yeah, I said. Just don't shoot me while you have your blindfold on. We walked into the woods in silence, and after a mile or so, I reached the spot where Sergio was last seen. We sat there and waited an hour or so until all the noise suddenly stopped, and I heard the sound of something massive dragging across the forest floor. Put on your blindfold, I said, putting on mine. We can't risk seeing this thing. John nodded, grinned, and put the blindfold on. Whatever it was, it sounded massive. It said, in a demonic and ancient voice, "Leave this place." John and I fired a shot into the direction of the voice, and although my bullet missed by a mile, the old man's shot was a direct hit. Although I couldn't hear it, I saw the light from the blast of fire the sparks and flames coming from the barrel of John's shotgun, and it hit the demon monster. The thing screeched and we moved back a few steps, still blind. And without warning, the ground opened up beneath us. What the? John and I fell into the cavern beneath us, 6 feet down. You okay? I asked. Never been better, John replied. Where are we? I lifted my blindfold and looked around to see that we had fallen into a subterranean tunnel that led deeper into the earth. Anyone there? Please help! A voice screamed, presumably Sergio's based on these circumstances. We ran down the tunnel and searched for Sergio, and we found the man, lying on the cave floor with a broken leg. We're gonna get you out of here, I said. But I could hear a screech come from the entrance to the tunnel, as the monster crawled down, breaking the walls. I reached down and picked up the tank of gasoline, had my eyes closed and waited until the monster was just close enough, my heart beating. Get out! I lit the Molotov, yelled at John to take cover, just as the beast got within a dozen meters in our range. I had previously sprinkled the white ash Meredith had given me on the gasoline tank for extra effectiveness, so that it could kill it if the explosion didn't. It was only a few meters away from us. I lit the gasoline bomb and threw it, and as it exploded, I grinned. Gotcha. So, the funny thing is, a group of redneck hunters found us later on. They had apparently found the hole in the explosion crater and investigated. John and I had suffered some mild burns from the enormous gasoline explosion, but the missing guy Sergio came out harmless besides the broken leg that he had already had. The redneck family dragged us all the way to their pickup truck and then drove us to the hospital, where we all got treated for our injuries. Sergio was found and reunited after a long disappearance, and Jonathan paid me in the thousands with the money I didn't expect him to have. When I went back to the place where Sergio had disappeared, and where I had blown the beast high to the sky, I found a very strange, giant, half-human skeleton where I remembered it getting blown up. Sergio Alexander was found and I had killed one of the things that went bump in the night. Case closed.